What if everything we've been told about autoimmunity is wrong? I'm Elizabeth Yarnell. After awakening partially blind one morning in 1999, a doctor told me my multiple sclerosis would put me in a wheelchair within 10 years. I refused to accept that as the end of the story, so I started investigating. Welcome to the Inflammation Investigator, the podcast that uncovers the inflammation lurking underneath your ailments. Because autoimmune and chronic conditions should not be viewed as death knells when they are actually alarm bells. I'm a traditional naturopath and founder of the Inflammation Academy. And in 2 episodes every week, we dig into what conventional medicine might be missing. If you're living with chronic or unexplained symptoms, this investigation is for you. Your body has been trying to tell you something. Let's start listening.
In the last episode, we started talking about additives and preservatives in our food supply. And today, we are going to talk about how reducing exposures to triggers is a solution. Moving from diet and lifestyle. Oh, don't forget I will be reading. Moving from a diet and lifestyle dependent upon processed and packaged foods to one based in real, pure, whole foods was not easy. Nor was identifying and clearing out potential triggers from my living environment. However, my efforts were unquestionably worthwhile, as these two practices worked well together, enough for me to mostly avoid damaging MS symptom flare-ups for more than a decade. Being so conscientious required a lot of learning, awareness, and discipline, but was also incredibly empowering, with the tangible reward of not progressing further along the multiple sclerosis slope. I was feeling pretty good as I had reclaimed control over my health, and as a result felt more positively about my present and my future. I speculated that adhering to a pure foodist diet and overall clean living were the secrets to successfully living with any autoimmune condition, and really would be the best way to eat and live for anyone wanting to be healthier. This practice was working so well for me that some of my closest and oldest friends would forget that I had multiple sclerosis, and new acquaintances might never even know. As I approached my mid-30s, I heard my biological clock ticking. It has been observed that autoimmune conditions such as MS move into remission during a pregnancy due to pregnancy hormones thought to calm the immune system in order not to attack the fetus as a foreign invader. And in fact, I felt healthy and strong during both of my pregnancies. Each time I craved fruits and vegetables and would come home from the farmer's market with more produce than we could hope to eat, and then load the rest into soups to freeze in anticipation of the new baby's arrival. During this first pregnancy, I continued my pace of attending hour-long jazzercise classes 3 or 4 times a week into my 8th month, though I stopped jumping and kept it low impact as my belly grew. I slept well at night, was filled with energy during the day, and I dare say I even glowed. I loved being pregnant, and I did not experience the postpartum exacerbation that MS patients often experience in the first 3 months after giving birth, which was a relief as I had enough on my hands with taking care of a sickly baby. As I mentioned earlier, my first child, a boy, was unwell from the moment he was born. Even though I breastfed and made all his baby food myself from only whole and organic ingredients, his little body was racked by frequent spitting up coupled with painful bowel dysfunction. The poor child was in agony, at times pooping only every 10 to 14 days, and at other times having explosive diarrhea multiple times daily that would leak out of his diaper. As an infant, he would projectile vomit so predictably that I had a supply of smocks for guests to wear when they held him in order to protect their clothing. The pediatrician called it colic, but while the baby hit his other developmental milestones, the regurgitating didn't end as he moved out of babyhood, and in fact continued through his preschool years. He was a hungry and enthusiastic eater, but most of it came back up later. He rarely slept for longer than 90 minutes at a stretch, waking with screams of agony with what we eventually recognized to be heartburn, or in medical speak, gastroesophageal reflux disease, GERD. After 6 months, the one night we desperately tried the popular fad of sleep training that was guaranteed to have your baby sleep through the night with just a few cries, was in our household a legendary 6-puke night. My poor baby. Maybe sleep training could work for other babies, I thought blearily as I rocked him in my arms that night, but it felt cruel and inhumane to leave a baby to vomit himself to sleep. We resigned ourselves to never getting a full night's sleep. I knew I needed help from experts. I took him to pediatric gastrointestinal clinics, got abdominal x-rays to look for any anatomical abnormalities that could be causing his distress, and even had his DNA mapped. Nothing showed up to explain his symptoms. Although he received diagnoses of acid reflux, GERD, gastritis, irritable bowel syndrome, IBS, and gastroparesis, or the slow movement of waste through an immobile gastric system, the suggestions from the doctors were limited to keeping him hydrated, feeding him lots of fiber, using over-the-counter antacid drugs, spoon-feeding him mineral oil to slicken the colon, and large regular doses of Miralax brand laxatives. I admit that once I learned that mineral oil is a petroleum product, I could not in good conscience pour it into my child's uncontaminated body. So the mineral oil was out, though we did try other oils to no avail. After a few unproductive years of following the doctor's orders, the only thing I was certain of was that my son was not deficient in Miralax. Chronically constipated and still vomiting, by 6 years old, he'd fallen off the standard pediatric height and weight charts. This was not super surprising since he rarely kept food down long enough to fully digest it, but it's absolutely heartbreaking to watch a child fail to thrive. I tried keeping him gluten-free, then tried removing dairy, then corn, then soy. He got probiotics every day and a multivitamin, but nothing I tried seemed to make any difference in how his digestive system functioned. By the time he reached kindergarten, he still wasn't pooping regularly, nor was he sleeping through the night, and he was still vomiting frequently and wetting the bed. He wasn't outgrowing these problems. One day I got a phone call from the school nurse telling me he had spontaneously thrown up while standing in line in the cafeteria for lunch. I wished I had felt surprise, but this was such a common occurrence that the school nurse and I were on a first-name basis. I brought him home and cuddled up with him in my bed, gently rubbing his stomach, tracing a backward letter C across his gut, hoping to stimulate peristalsis in his colon and a much-needed bowel movement which I knew would help him feel better. I looked at my suffering child, wondering where to turn next for help and hoping he could not see the worry in my face. I didn't know what to do. I felt I was failing as a parent because I couldn't help my baby feel better inside his own body. Finally, I took him to a type of alternative practitioner I had heard of but never visited, a naturopathic doctor. She asked a lot of questions and did some muscle testing against what seemed like hundreds of glass vials of substances from molds and grasses to animals, chemicals, and foods. Muscle testing, or applied kinesiology, is based on the idea that the body communicates its health needs through muscle activity. She would have him hold a closed vial in one hand, and then see if he could resist her gentle pressure to lower his other arm or not. If he could not resist, then, she explained, his body was weakened by the substance inside that vial. It all seemed a little bit hokey to someone accustomed to the allopathic medicine practice. She moved through the vials quickly, and at the end of the visit, she opined that she thought his symptoms might be due to inflammation from food sensitivities. But he doesn't have hives or anaphylaxis, I pointed out. She explained that those were signs of food allergies. She was talking about food sensitivities. Food sensitivities can cause all kinds of symptoms of inflammation. This was 2008, and it was the first time I had heard of such a thing as food sensitivities, but soon it was all I could think about. If my son's symptoms were signs of inflammation from food sensitivities, then we just needed to figure out which foods were triggering the inflammation and remove them from his diet. This is not as easy as it may sound, as I will demonstrate in a little bit here. The naturopathic doctor recommended a blood test she trusted that would tell us not only the foods that were causing his body to be inflamed, but more importantly, the foods that didn't trigger inflammation for him. I gulped when I learned the price of the test, as my husband was a school teacher and I was a newly published cookbook author still building a following, and money was tight. So I put it off, hoping that maybe, now that I knew his problems had to do with food, I might be able to figure it out myself. Who was I kidding? 1 week later, he was in the exact same place, frustrated, constipated, and covered in vomit. I felt desperate. I had already tried the medical route, which hadn't worked, and beyond this test, I didn't have any other ideas left. I gritted my teeth and applied for a new credit card. As I took my young son to get his blood drawn and then out for a well-earned ice cream cone afterward, I was feeling like this was our last hope. 2 weeks later, when the test results came back, I was shocked to learn that many of the foods we had believed to be so healthy for him, such as broccoli, lemon, and garlic, were actually making him sick. Shockingly, almost 1/3 of the 150 foods and chemicals tested were reactive for him. This included many of the usual suspects, like wheat, corn, dairy, and peanuts, but also so many other foods that we never would have suspected, like turkey, honey, and cauliflower. Not to mention all the additives that turned up high on his list, from food dye and color, FD&C, red, number 3, to benzoic acid and fructose. There were even items such as coffee that turned up highly reactive for him, even though at 6 years old he had never even tasted coffee. It was a daunting task to prepare safe foods for him. At first, I thought I could just make special meals for him, while the rest of the family ate our regular healthy recipes. But after something of a nervous breakdown on my part that included some tears and some throwing of food, not my finest moment, I will admit, but at least I was alone at the time, I decreed that everyone in the household, me, his dad, his little sister, would eat what he could eat. It wasn't easy. I spent hours researching recipes, reading labels, grocery shopping, and then preparing his favorite foods with safer ingredients. We swapped rice pasta in for wheat pasta, coconut milk in for cow's milk, and ground chicken in for our usual ground turkey and meatballs. I prepared and packed all of his lunches for school and worked with his teacher to have a supply of snacks and treats safe for him to eat at snack time and during classroom birthday celebrations. I baked safe cookies, muffins, and cupcakes, created gluten-free and dairy-free pizzas, and made homemade dairy-free caramels and color-free candies for him to enjoy. And lo and behold, we began to see results. He stopped vomiting so frequently and began pooping more regularly and without pain. In fact, Within 2 months of changing his diet to one that was anti-inflammatory for him, he had gained 15 pounds and grown 2.5 inches. In addition to the measurable physical benchmarks, were the equally as noticeable behavioral changes. He finally began sleeping through the night for the first time at age 6, and he stopped wetting the bed. His mood lightened, and he became more agreeable and less angry and rebellious. He shot ahead academically in school and became noticeably happier. One day, while putting away freshly laundered towels in the linen closet, I paused in the hallway, sank against the wall, and cried quiet tears from hearing him alone in his room, contentedly singing to himself as he organized his magic cards. As far as I knew, he had never been happy enough to sing to himself before. Addressing the inflammation rather than the symptoms radically transformed not only my son's life from one of failing to thrive to one of growing, learning, and developing, but making this lifestyle change also had a radiating effect on the life and happiness of everyone in the family. In the next episode, we'll talk about how foods are the sum of their ingredients. Until then.
And that's another case filed on the Inflammation Investigator. Remember, every symptom is your body's way of communicating. We just need to learn the language. If today's episode sparked something for you, I want to hear about it. Share your own investigation discoveries with me on social media at Elizabeth Yarnell, or find me at elizabethyarnell.com. Your experience could be exactly what another listener needs to hear. And make sure you're subscribed so you never miss an episode. And here's the thing about investigations. They work best when you're not going it alone. If this podcast is helping you uncover the answers you've been searching for, please like, rate, subscribe, and review, and share it with someone who needs to hear this message. As a new podcast, these actions mean more than you know. Want to dive deeper into your own inflammation investigation? Head over to inflammationinvestigator.com, where you can take my free inflammation quiz to uncover which hidden triggers might be affecting your health. Until next time, this is Elizabeth Yarnell, your inflammation investigator, reminding you that the solutions to your health issues are out there. Let's find them together.